Hey, this is Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society Podcast, reminding you that this podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the other great podcasts on the network at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, President of the Non-Threat Assassination Squad, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. All too often, gun owners and gun culture are portrayed in the worst possible ways in the media. This podcast aims to counter that narrative by shining a light on the members of gun culture who are involved in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, while IDPA members make up just a tiny fraction of the overall gun-owning public, I think they're a representative cross-section of that demographic. From all walks of life, rich, poor, and in between, young and old, men and women, patriotic, caring, friendly, and outgoing. And this podcast is about them. Today, you're going to meet one of these awesome people. Now, before we get started, I want to talk to you about Gun Mag Warehouse. Do you need more magazines? Who doesn't, right? Magazines wear out over time. They get damaged, they get lost, and depending on the state you're in, they might get banned. Maybe you just, you got a new gun, you need extra magazines for it. Or maybe you want some magazines to set aside to use for dry fire. Make sure that you've got plenty by visiting Gun Mag Warehouse. I use them myself. The prices are great. Shipping is fast. Visit unloadpodcast.com/mags, and when you buy, we'll earn a small commission to help keep the lights on here at Unload and Show Clear. So go visit them at unloadpodcast.com/mags. All right, time to get on with the show. Here is today's special guest. Our guest for today's show is David Orr from San Diego, California. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's glad to be here.
Well, tell us a little about yourself. Tell us what you do for a living there in San Diego.
Sure. I work for a medical device company, and I run a couple of software teams that builds the software for those medical devices.
Very good. So, as I mentioned, California not being a very gun-friendly state, but you've got a pretty active gun community there, in particularly in Southern California. Tell us about how you got interested in guns in the first place. Did you grow up around them, or was it a family thing, or did you develop an interest later in life?
Yeah, I mean, I was never discouraged from being interested in guns by my family. Nobody in my family shoots except me. And when I turned 18, I told my mom I wanted to get a 22 gun, and she said, ask my dad, and he said, sure, if that's what he wants to do. And so I got a Ruger 10/22. And played around a little bit with some pistols with some friends and stuff, but it was never really into guns. It was more of a novelty. And then I went for, probably a good 25 years with no interest really at all. And one day I was watching the show Top Shot and just thought, wow, that really looks like a ton of fun. I wonder if that's something I could do. I really want to try to do something like that. And so got on the internet, of course, and browsed around and finally came across IDPA and USPSA, and kind of the rest is history. I just started practicing, went out and bought a pistol and started practicing, and loved it ever since. That was back in 2011.
What was that first pistol that you went out and bought?
Yeah, interesting. I went out and bought a Beretta PX4. Don't know why. It was just kind of, I guess, what got sold to me. Definitely wasn't really the pistol for IDPA, and I've since sold that. But that was the first one that I got a couple of matches with.
You were one of those guys who you didn't have somebody who introduced you. You were one of the guys who just showed up and said, "Hi, I'm David. I'm here to shoot." What was that first experience like, walking in to a range and not knowing anybody? And what was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Because and I'll tell you why I think it's such a good question. But no, I didn't know anybody. Didn't know a soul, and but figured I didn't want to go in there and just be a complete noob and shoot myself in the foot or something. So I practiced a lot. I spent probably 6 months going to the range, read online you should dry fire, so I did a bunch of dry fire. So when I went to my first match, I wasn't a complete newbie. I at least knew how to shoot a gun and load it and drop in my holster and all that stuff. But I had never competed, and so looked up the local clubs, and found one that was going to be on a day that was convenient for me, a match. And so I called the match director and told him who I was and that I was brand new to shooting sports, and a super nice guy. And so, come find me in the morning, and I'll hang with you for the match. And so that's what he did. And I didn't do all that great, but nobody got hurt. So so it turned out pretty good. But that's how I went into it. The reason I thought that was such a good question, though, is because now my advice to every new person that, or anybody that's even remotely interested is don't wait 6 months. Just go to your club. And I feel like I wasted 6 months of competition practice that I could have had just sitting there in a little box in a indoor shooting range. I could have been out there competing. So
right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people think, "Oh, I'm just not ready to do that. I need some more practice. I need to get better before I come out and shoot."
Yep, exactly. And I just wish that I had started it earlier. I would have been hopefully that much better. But I did. I got going.
What's your favorite division? What division do you compete in most often, and what are you shooting? What gun are you shooting nowadays?
Sure. So I started off with after I got rid of the TX4, I ended up getting an XD tactical 9mm. Stuck with that for a little while, and then switched over to Glock. And I shot Glock for about 3 years in all divisions. I've trained with a number of the really good shooters. I've trained with Bob Vogel and JJ Rakaza and a couple other guys. And one bit of advice that somebody gave me was, you're relying on dropping this. I'm a left-handed shooter. So they said, you're relying on dropping the slide with just, slamming the magazine in there and hoping the slide will drop. And it's true. That's how I reloaded. Mm-hmm. And they said, you need to make it more consistent and find a gun that you can reach the slide release with your finger, or an ambi gun.
Right.
And so I switched to CZ. A bunch of my friends shoot CZ and convinced me that CZ is the gun to go with. So now I've switched everything over. I've sold almost all my Glocks and shoot exclusively CZ. I love CZs. I work on them myself, do all my own gunsmithing, and I shoot all divisions of IDPA. I've even shot some revolver and some bug, but not so much of those. All the auto divisions, and I shoot it all. My favorite, I think, honestly. Lately I've been shooting a lot of the compact carry CCP, mm-hmm. and I think I really like the smaller guns. They just suit me, and so I really enjoy that division.
Which of the CZs are you shooting? What are you shooting in the CCP?
Yeah, in CCP I'm shooting the PO1.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
What was your first sanctioned match?
Okay. Question. My first sanctioned match was the California state match in 2012. It was on the week of my birthday, which is kind of cool. And I went up there with my wife, and that was the only match she's ever gone to with me since, because she got horrible allergies, and she's just associated shooting with allergies. And so,
oh no,
yeah. So I shot that match as a marksman. I think I was fourth marksman in my first match in 2012.
What do you, aside from finishing fourth, what do you remember about the experience?
I remember being really intimidated and thinking, wow, this is so much harder than my club matches that I shoot at. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but I ended up on kind of a super squad with some of the top masters. And so Bobby McGee was one of them, and Bill Go was another. And I was watching those guys, just thinking, wow, I don't think I'll ever get that good. Those guys are really, really good. And so, yeah, it was intimidating. Shot a lot of no-shoots.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often do you said you started out practicing for 6 months before you even got started. What is your practice routine like now? Dry fire, live fire, local matches? What's that routine like, and what do you think is a good balance between those different kinds of practice?
Mm-hmm. I practice a lot. I have a good job. I don't have kids, and so I can go to a lot of doing this sport. I really enjoy it, and so I shoot. On average, I shoot about 30,000 rounds a year. Reload all of that myself, and I dry fire practice probably. So when I go to the range, and I only can shoot indoors because I just can't, based on my work schedule, I can't get outdoors and shoot during the week. So I shoot indoor at an indoor range that knows me and lets me shoot drawing and firing as many shots and as fast as I want them, reloading, all that stuff. They trust me and they know me, so that's really great.
Nice.
And so I shoot about 300 rounds during practice, and I do that depending on what part of the season it is, between 2 to 4 times a week. And then I run the San Diego Tactical Shooters Club. I'm the match director for that. And so twice a month we have a local match that we do. I set all the stages. I don't personally set them, but I create all the stages, and I have a team of people that help me set them. And so I shoot that match every 2 weeks, and then I try to get up to. There's a match up in LA that I try and get to at least once a month, and then there's a couple of other local matches if I want to do those. Every now and then I'll reserve a weekend for myself that isn't shooting, or my wife, I should say, reserved for her. But yeah, so I shoot 3 matches a month. I shoot 2 to 3 to 4 times a week, live fire indoors, and then I pretty much dry fire every night, even if it's just for 5 minutes. There's never a day that goes by that I don't pick up a gun and pull the trigger, 100 times.
Is there, do you have a routine that you practice at the range when you're doing live fire? Is there something specific that you do or that you like to do every practice that kind of gives you a gauge on what you need to work on or where you are? Or is every practice different based on what you're preparing for in an upcoming match?
Mm-hmm. So I always have a routine. I don't go to the range just to waste a bunch of lead. I think that's not constructive, and I think that if you don't feel like having a routine, you should probably just dry fire. Live ammunition is expensive, and so I try to have a routine, or I do have a routine every time I go indoors. My starting routine was kind of taught to me from one of the people that I've used as a mentor, Morgan Allen, became a friend of mine through IDPA, and something he said to do to go out there and really just assess how you're going to be shooting that day is just start out at close at 5 yards, shoot a couple of rounds, then move to 7 and 10. And so I basically move my target from 5 out to 25. I do that every time I shoot 40 rounds, and assess kind of how I'm shooting it at those distances. I'm getting older, so my eyesight's a little bit not as good as it used to be. And seeing at 25 yards is a little bit more difficult, but that's how I start out my practice every time. I do it real slow, deliberate fire, trying as far out as I can. And so that's how I start my practice. Every time that's how I start my practice. And sometimes I'll notice I'll get out to 15 yards and I'm shanking them pretty hard down and right as a left-handed shooter. Mm-hmm. And then I'll just decide, okay, I need to clean that up before I start going out to distance. So I'll focus then on making sure that I get a really good solid grip and good platform. But I almost always have a very specific routine that I want to work on, that I will start working through. And if I get to a point where I'm doing really, really well at something, I'll just move on. I won't finish that because I figured I'm good there. If I get to something that I'm struggling on, I will then extend that if I feel like I need to get into more reps on that particular drill. So I'm flexible with my routine, but I always have a routine.
Gotcha. You talking about California, and a lot of people hear California, they think anti-gun, they think they don't think about the shooting scene in California. Talk about what the competitive shooting scene is like in your area. I was surprised when we were talking before the show at how vibrant it sounds like the scene is there.
Yeah. So in San Diego in particular, we have a really, really big shooting community here. Where we shoot at, it's a pretty good range. We have a lot of pistol bays. I think we got I think 10 or 12 pistol bays, and out to 600-yard rifle. So it's a really good range. It's on an Indian reservation, and they let us use their range, which is very generous of them. And so we share the same day that we do our IDPA match, we share that with the USPSA club. And that club is even bigger than mine. I usually get about 30 people to my match, which is about what we want, because we do 6 stages, and that gets us in and out in a reasonable amount of time. That club, the USPSA club, they do 6 stages also. They get over 100 shooters. So on one weekend, on any particular weekend, we'll get 130 to 150 people at the range. And like I said, you can go up to LA and they get just as many people. So no, the shooting community in California is actually pretty big, bigger than people think. I mean, we have a lot of people in California. So,
right.
There's plenty of people who shoot in California. We're all voters and we all actively vote. But we're outweighed by the rest of the state.
Not to try to get into the politics, but how do the laws in California affect you as a shooter, as a competitive shooter?
Yep. So obviously, if you're going to be shooting rifle, that affects you pretty bad, because 10-round magazines are the max. You have to have, there's registering of your new laws around registering of your ARs. Or AKs, anything that is considered an evil gun, an assault rifle.
Right.
You can only put 10-round magazine in those. 30-round magazines are just illegal. So really, if you're shooting 3-gun, there are 3-gun matches here, but they're pretty restrictive. Now with pistol, specifically IDPA, no problem. That's probably why IDPA is pretty big in California, because the maximum magazine count that you can use in IDPA is 10 rounds, and that's what the state law is. So now I know a lot of people are afraid to come to California with their standard capacity magazines. You're totally legal to come into California with a standard capacity magazine, as long as your intent is to leave with that standard capacity magazine when you're done with your competition. You don't have to register it with anybody or do anything crazy. You fly in. You shoot your match and you take your gun and your magazines with you when you leave, and everything's fine. Now, as a resident of California, I am not allowed to own, or actually I should say I'm not allowed to buy, sell, manufacture, trade, or anything like that. Anything more
right.
bunch of large capacity means it's legal to own them. You just can't buy, sell, trade, find, any of that.
Right.
So IDPA doesn't affect it all. USPSA, more so. They have you're limited in your open divisions, and technically you're limited to 10-round magazines. And I'll leave it at that.
Right. What kind of matches do you like? Different. I like to ask this question because I'm curious to see what kind of answers I get. Some people love to run and gun. Some people like really technical stages where they have to really plan and think about their reloads and their movement. Some people like really tight targets and lots of non-threats or hard cover. Some people like lots of movers. What kinds of stages, what kinds of matches do you like when you see a match book and you say, ooh, this really looks fun? What kind of thing are you looking for?
I love movers, and I love moving. When I look at a stage and it's got the maximum amount of movement that IDPA allows, I love that. I love running. I'm a pretty active person myself, and so I love getting out there and running around. I also like stages where you need to plan. I love it when the stage designer takes the reloads into account, especially with all divisions, so that if you're running an 8-round gun or you're running a 10-round gun, the reloads may come in at different places, and you can tell that the stage designer has taken that into account. I really like those stages because for the newbie or for the marksman, they just shoot till their gun's empty and do their reload. But for the master, the expert, they think, okay, if I do a tactical reload right here, I'm going to save myself 0.3 of a second. And those are the kind of stages that I really like, because I practice back reloads all the time, and I really focus on those type of activities that are going to save me a couple of tenths here, a couple of tenths there. So that's what I like. And And I love stages where you got to make a choice. Do you shoot like a master or do you shoot like an expert? And some people look at that and go, "Oh, I'm not going to take that chance. That's too tight." And I look at that and go, "Ooh, that's a good challenge," right? So those are the kind of stages I like. Do you shoot the activator, shoot 2 statics, and then come back to the mover? I like that.
Yeah. The hold my beer stages.
Yeah, exactly. This is either going to be just awesome or a total disaster.
If I had to ask you to name, one memory, one moment, one match, or a particular stage that was memorable, fun, exciting, weird, that you've been involved in since you got started, what 1 or 2 come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one, if anybody knows me and is listening to this or has looked at the scores from last year's Nationals, definitely it's a disappointing moment, but also an enlightening moment. So last year, shooting CCP as an expert, probably admittedly a little bit of a sandbag, master in all the other divisions. And so, I wanted to make master at Nationals in CCP. And I had a spectacular match. I really did. And going into it, I was thinking, wow, I have a chance at being the division champ. And I thought I did have a really good chance. Ken Park, who is the guy who eventually won that match, he beat me by 0.39 of a second, less than half a second. And so, the super disappointment that came from that, congrats to Ken. I actually went and found him at the award ceremony and congratulated him for a spectacular run. So there was a huge amount of disappointment behind that at not winning a national division. But also because I was so close to him, I made DM Distinguished Master. And so there was a lot of strong emotion, happy emotion around that. I was, of course, also first expert. So I got bumped, not just to Master, but to Distinguished Master. So that was probably my most memorable moment from any of my matches. That was super high and super low at the same time.
The best of both worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
So what is it about IDPA as we wrap things up here? What is it about this sport that excites you, that you're passionate about? What is it about IDPA that you love so much that you devote as much time as you do to it?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I would say it's one of those sports where if you want to put the time in, and I'm a perfect example of this, you don't have to have a whole ton of natural talent or have been doing it all your life. There are plenty of people who've been shooting since they were, 5 years old or whatever, and they're good or really good. I wasn't that. I started, when I was in my 40s, and but I practiced a lot. I devoted a lot of time and effort to it because I wanted to get good. And it's one of those sports where if you do, you can be really competitive, and that's fun. I mean, shooting is fun, but winning is more fun. And so that's one reason why I really like it. You try hard, you practice really hard, and you can do well. That's the personal kind of self-interested part of it for me. The kind of outward-facing part that I really, really enjoy is being a match director at a club match where there are a lot of people that don't put in nearly as much time as I do. And they still come out weekend after weekend. And, they come because I build fun stages and they really enjoy it. And I get to meet new people, and some young, some old, male, female, it doesn't matter. I just get to meet some new people that are interested in shooting for shooting's sake. And that's why I keep doing it. And IDPA, I feel anyway, IDPA has more kind of maybe a less competitive, it's not necessarily the right way I want to say it, but compared to USPSA, you get a lot of the, run gun and open guns, and, it's more of a really, really competitive nature, so much so that I haven't made a lot of friends in USPSA, but I've made a ton of friends in IDPA. And I guess that's why I really like IDPA. Not to say I don't like USPSA, I do like it. I've made friends there, but IDPA is really kind of, I keep getting drawn back into IDPA. When I say, you know what, I've done what I want to do, I'm going to go shoot USPSA, I find myself back into IDPA because it's really the people. I like the people so much.
Yep, totally agree. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for spending the time.
For sure. It's my pleasure.
All right, that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much to our special guest for coming on the show. If you know somebody in the IDPA community who deserves some recognition, I'd love to talk to them. Send me an email at Lloyd, Lloyd, at unloadpodcast.com. Check out the show notes for today's episode and listen to past episodes at unloadpodcast.com. And if you like what you hear on the show and you'd like to support us, help keep the lights on, pay the bills, we would love your support. Visit patreon.com/unload and make a small monthly contribution to help continue what we're doing here. Tune in again next week for another edition of Unload and Show Clear.